Hey guys, welcome to Econ. Um, little favor for you. Not going to have you do reading notes for Module 42, but I do need you to pay close attention to what we talk about today. We're going to introduce Module 42. I know we just wrapped up Module 41, but I think in terms of preparation for the next quiz and all that other stuff, it's more important that we know this stuff for Module 42. So let's go ahead and get to it. Just go ahead. Well, all I want you guys to do, just kind of write this down as, or type it down, I guess, preferably as you've done in the past, and then share it with me on the Dropbox, and I will set up a Dropbox for it later today. So this is that we're going to talk about the foreign exchange market. We did talk last time about current account, financial account, all that good stuff. I think it's important that we discuss or that we make an apt comparison, because it's easy to get confused by a lot of the stuff that we end up covering here. So I want to make sure that you guys are good to go. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and we're going to go straight here, and I'll just go from the current slide. This is at the end of the section of notes we discussed last time, but at the very least it'll provide you with some review. So we spoke about Chuck E. Cheese's before, and I find it kind of weird that we're talking about Chuck E. Cheese's again, based off kind of the context for our last discussion. But the best way to think about Chuck E. Cheese is to think about its relationship with the world outside of Chuck E. Cheese. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that in a second. But, in a situation, let's say that, Stas, that you are to go to Chuck E. Cheese, right? Why are you going to Chuck E. Cheese? Well, Stas, it's because you're a little weird and you like Chuck E. Cheese. You just don't want anybody else to know about that. So you go hang out with Jonah Lambert at Chuck E. Cheese. But in order to play the Chuck E. Cheese, or to play the games at Chuck E. Cheese, which, that's the big boy area. So Stas might not be allowed there. But you need Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Okay. So the machines do not accept coins, and they do not accept dollar bills. And essentially the same thing can be said in Japan, Germany, and Mexico, and there are exceptions. For example, there's high tourist areas in Mexico and areas that get a lot of American tourists where they might accept dollar bills. But for the most part, you can't just go into any random restaurant or any random store, whip out a $5 bill and expect them to be able to take it or to be willing to take it. So these countries, the bottom line is these countries do not accept dollars. So why do people want the tokens? This should be pretty obvious. Good job. Yes, it's so that they can play the games, right? So they want to play the games. I'm going to sneeze. Okay. Why do people want Chinese yen? Japanese yen. It's because they want to buy Japanese goods or to invest in Japanese market. Again, you can't play Japanese games without Japanese currency. Allergies bad. Okay. Let's get into Module 42. It's all about that concept. It's all about, if you guys understand that concept, it will go a long way to making sure that you understand Module 42. I won't say it's the do-all be-all, but it's certainly a good place to start. Let's assume the current rate of exchange is $1 for 4 tokens. Not a bad assumption. Each token is about 25 cents. So let me ask you this. let's say that Chuck E. Cheese decided one day that they were going to change the exchange rate of dollars to tokens from $1 equals 10 tokens. In other words, 10 cents would get you a token at Chuck E. Cheese. Well, you'd probably have what? An influx of people at Chuck E. Cheese. Why? Because now they can play the same amount of more games for the same amount of money. They can put $1 into a machine and get 10 tokens, play 10 games instead of putting $1 in the machine and only being able to play 4. So it makes sense that there'd be more interest in Chuck E. Cheese products. Demand for games would increase at Chuck E. Cheese. So when we say that the dollar has appreciated in value and more of these foreign games, quote unquote, will be purchased. So if the dollar's appreciated, in this case, it has appreciated, even though the dollar rate has stayed the same, a dollar goes further, does it not? So we say that it appreciates. Instead of getting you 4 tokens, it's gotten 10 tokens. So the dollar has appreciated. Chuck E. Cheese tokens have depreciated, and there's going to be more of a desire to play these foreign games or to get these foreign goods and services. The same thing happens when the dollar appreciates. Imports rise, so net exports decrease, okay, in this case. So if the dollar becomes stronger, you guys may have heard people talk about the dollar in terms of gaining strength. Certainly sounds like a good thing, and in many ways it is. But just like anything in economics, there's a dark side, right? And so the dark side is that there are going to, one, be less likelihood from people in Japan to buy US goods because in comparison with them and their goods are cheaper, as opposed to people in the United States. If I'm a US citizen, and if I know that I can play games at Chuck E. Cheese for real cheap, I'm going to not have a problem forking out dollar bills, okay? In other words, the demand for those US dollar bills goes down. But let's present an alternate example. Let's say that instead of $1 for 10 tokens or $1 for even 4 tokens, that you for every $1 you only get 2 tokens from Chuck E. Cheese. Well, what's going to happen to demand for Chuck E. Cheese goods, Chuck E. Cheese games? It's going to go down. There's going to be less demand for it. So fewer dollars would be converted or supplied, and demand for games would increase, or would decrease. Demand for games would decrease. So it's fair to say in this example that the dollar has depreciated. A dollar does not take you as far, okay? A dollar does not take you as far as it did in the other 2 examples. So again, sounds dark, sounds like the dollar's weak, but there is a good side to that. The good side for the United States potentially is that you've got people from other countries that are taking an interest in US goods. Why? Because at least compared to yen, they're less expensive than they were before because that dollar is weaker. Let's go to Mexico. So understanding exchange rates, let's see how this plays out in real life. So we're removing Chuck E. Cheese from the equation now, and we're going to compare 2 separate countries, the United States and Mexico. Let's say that all this coronavirus stuff, all this, it all goes by the wayside, which, Lord help us, please let this go by the wayside. Let's say it all goes by the wayside and that we're able to go on trips again. And let's say that our boy Stas decides, I'm going to Mexico, right? He is going to Mexico. Okay, there is our boy Stas right here. This is about the face Stas makes every day for some weird reason. Okay, so on his trip to Mexico, and let's say that he goes in June. Wow, yeah, it is short turnaround for Stas. He's really banking on this virus going away. And let's say that while he's on his trip, he does the typical stupid tourist thing and he gets a Mexican t-shirt, okay? That he gets a Mexican t-shirt at one of the local stores. Maybe he's on a cruise. Maybe he hops off of the cruise ship and goes and buys a t-shirt. Let's say that the price for a t-shirt is 182 Mexican pesos. Do we know if that's expensive or inexpensive? No, because we have no point of comparison. But let's say that we only have US dollars in our pocket. Okay, so can he buy that t-shirt? No, he cannot play the game. So what does he have to do? Well, he has to go to the foreign exchange market. And because that's the only one the store owner wants. How is he going to get pesos? He's got to go to he's got to go to some foreign exchange market, whether it's in the airport or the cruise ship or, off the dock of the cruise ship, whatever the case might be. So he goes to this foreign exchange market. And what's important to note is that this foreign exchange market is not a concrete place. Now, it's just kind of the demand and supply of dollars, just like any market that we talked about. What is a market? It's a place, it's some place where goods are exchanged. In this case, we're talking about foreign and domestic currency. So let's say that when he goes to the foreign exchange market to exchange his dollar bills so he can buy his little t-shirt, and he probably would buy a little t-shirt. I could see Stas buying a real tight t-shirt so that he tries to accentuate those little muscles there. So he goes and he buys a t-shirt, and to do that he finds out that $1 equals 13 pesos. So for every dollar he exchanges, he will get 13 pesos in return. Well, math guys, can we guess? We don't need to do the math for this, but how many dollars? We should now know if that t-shirt is expensive or not, based off of this. How many dollars, okay, is that t-shirt essentially? Well, let's do the math. How many dollars can you get for 1 peso? Essentially, $1 equals 13 pesos. And so that means that it's essentially the equivalent of 7 cents, and if you round up, maybe 8. So between 7 and 8 cents is 1 peso, right? So the exchange rate is simply the price of one currency in terms of another currency. That's important to note. Notice that I have it italicized down here. So how much does the t-shirt cost in dollars in the month of June? Well, and this is how we would calculate it. 182 pesos, 182 pesos divided by 13, because again, it's 13 pesos per dollar, is about $14. So t-shirt, 14 bucks ain't bad. It's tough to get t-shirts, especially souvenir t-shirts for better than that. Stas, what are you doing wearing a t-shirt like that? You come back from Mexico, I'm gonna start cooking you. Okay. So let's talk about appreciation versus depreciation. What if you returned to Mexico in September when $1 US could only buy 12 pesos? So in other words, 1 peso is essentially a little over 8 cents. What has happened to our currency relative to their currency? Well, the shirt would now cost $15 as opposed to the $14 that it had cost before. So what's happened to the US dollar? It's depreciated in value relative to the peso. That's always an important thing to note. We don't know what other markets are doing. Okay, we're not taking, it's not depreciated overall, it's depreciated in relation to the peso. So now you've got t-shirts that cost about 15 bucks. So is Stas more or less likely to buy that t-shirt? And he's probably going to be a little less likely to buy the t-shirt. We would say then that the peso has appreciated relative to the dollar, and that the peso ends up buying more. Okay, the peso buys more. And we would say that the dollar has depreciated relative to the peso. The dollar buys less. And I realize that it can be confusing, okay? Because you see $1 equal to 12 pesos, and you think, oh, well, that's less pesos, so that must mean the dollar has appreciated. But we can't think about it in those terms. We've got to think about it like $1 does not get you as many pesos as you got before. The purchasing power of the dollar has gone down relative to that of Mexico. So, important graph I'm going to show you in a second. The price of the currency or the exchange rate is determined in the market using supply and demand. If you want pesos, you demand them. Okay, so Stas represents the demand curve in this case. And in order to acquire pesos, I must supply dollars to the exchange market. Another important thing to note, while Stas does represent demand for pesos, he's also impacting the supply of dollar bills. Because what is he doing? He's taking those dollar bills, putting them in the supply of the foreign exchange market, in other words, increasing the supply of that market, so that he can acquire more pesos, all right, for whatever reason. And if once that t-shirt becomes more expensive, he's less likely to do that. He might hang out there for a little bit, hang out on the beach, work on his tan bod, but overall, he's not going to buy goods and services there. He'll wait till he can get it for free back on the cruise ship. When Americans demand pesos, they must supply more dollars. So Americans, or Stas, represents or is impacting is adding to the supply of dollars when he goes to that foreign exchange market. And when he desires to get those pesos, he is impacting demand for pesos. This is what the market looks like. The market or the graph that we're going to need to know. It's a very important graph. It's the very last macroeconomics graph that you're going to need to be aware of in your high school career. Whatever currency market you are graphing is shown on the x-axis. So down here, we know because dollars is on the x-axis, and we should capitalize dollars, but we know that it is because it's on the x-axis that we are calculating the market for dollars. And then ideally we would write it up here as well. So you have it here, you have it here. And then when you label the exchange rate, whatever you're doing the market for goes in the denominator. And there's a way to think about this. I'll tell it to you in a second. And whatever you're comparing it against is in the numerator. Okay? And there's a couple ways you can label this. You don't have to write out exchange rate. You could write out ER. You could write out XR. Either way is fine. Down here, you can write the letter Q and then put a dollar symbol. Okay, you can do that as well. So there's a little flexibility there. Good way to think about how to label this. If you're doing the market for the US dollar, what goes below goes below. So what goes below, meaning the word dollar in the denominator, is going to go down here too. So if you're putting dollar here, you got to put dollar here because you're graphing the market for US dollars. If you were doing the market for pesos, you make sure you put pesos in the denominator and pesos down here. So that's fairly easy. It's just one of those things you've got to memorize. There you go, if you didn't know already. All right, so supply and demand curve, not different from anything we've done in the past. Equilibrium, we're graphing equilibrium here at 13 pesos. And then we're writing down our just S&D for supply and demand curve. Let's use a couple examples. Let's suppose Mexican citizens have more money to spend and choose to make financial investments in the United States. You know what? We've taken down a lot so far. I'm going to wait to go. I've introduced this concept. I'm going to go ahead and stop here because at least now we know what the curve looks like. And then next class, what we will do is we'll go over different examples of how this plays out, okay? So we'll go ahead and pause and stop the video here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this with you, and we will continue this conversation next class one way or the other. Have a good day, guys.